certainly not all of the findings in this study are consistent with a lot of what Weston had to say. But this particular idea of privacy as dealing with one specific piece of information and one recipient or one to many or many to one, but having that individual control over pieces of information and giving that to specific people seemed to be a common theme across a lot of this research. Another model of privacy is Altman's model of privacy regulation. And as you can see here, let's see if I point to it. It seems like a very simple model, but the idea Altman describes privacy as, or a person as having a boundary around them and regulating this boundary like a cell membrane would be, right? So if there are pieces of information can pass through the cell out into the world and out into the environment and out into other people. And this idea is not consistent with what I presented in the previous slide, saying that people want to share specific pieces of information with specific people. This model, Altman's model of privacy, would suggest that there's a specific piece of information, and either I keep that all to myself and I don't share it with anyone, or I allow it to pass this boundary and go out into the world. But I don't think that that's the way that people really, from a psychological perspective, have ideas about privacy. Instead, I've proposed this alternative model of privacy where you're sharing some information with some people, maybe a lot of information with some other people, and maybe there's a lot of information that you don't want to share with very specific people. And this can all happen simultaneously, right? So all of these things can co-occur at the same time, whereas in Altman's model of privacy regulation, either information is shared or it's not shared. So again, coming back to this design perspective, how do we support privacy? If this is our model of privacy, how do we support this? Well, one way is to focus right here on the X, and if people have decided that they don't want to share information, they don't want to give up information to a specific person, how can we facilitate that? How can we design to allow that to happen? Going back to the psychology literature, I looked at the idea of disclosure, which Girard defines as the act of revealing personal information to others. There are two specific things to point out here, and that is that it's a particular piece of information and it's an intentional revealing of a piece of information. So that's the definition of disclosure. But what about unintentional disclosures? So this is an example of a little Facebook message, and what happened is the person here that was sent the message ended up responding to everybody on the Facebook message and realizes it and says, whoops, I had no idea I was responding to everybody, right? And this is, you might all think back on this. Have you ever used the reply to all button when you meant to only respond to one person? Another example is when I'm emailing my advisor an image that he's asked for of me giving a presentation. So this is the photo that I was supposed to attach, and he was going to be very happy with that photo, but I accidentally attached a photo of me out partying it up, and he was not so happy that I was out partying instead of giving the presentation that I should have been giving. So in this case, I'm giving the wrong information to the right person, right? In the previous case, what happened was that the person responded to everybody, so they gave the information that they wanted to give, but they gave it to more people than they intended to. The last example that I'll give you is it's a very recent example that just happened in the Cornell Business School. There were some admins there, and they were having a steamy affair over email. And they were married, but not to each other. And so in this steamy email chain that they were having, the very last email that was sent by, I think it was by the gentleman, when he sent it back, he accidentally CC'd the entire business school at Cornell. And so everyone in the business school received a copy of the entire chain of the email. Clearly, this was an unintentional disclosure. This person definitely did not mean to do that, and it had, I think, probably some serious consequences. So what's going on in these cases, right? People often reveal information to entities, other people, companies, government agencies that they don't wish to reveal. I've given you some examples before. I'll talk about some more examples in the future. This can be termed a misclosure or disclosure error. And this violates privacy from a human factors perspective, right? So it's these people are violating their own privacy when they unintentionally give out information to others that they don't want to have that information. To introduce this concept to you a little bit more fully, define misclosure as the unintentional act or process of revealing or uncovering, or something that's uncovered in error or a disclosure accident. And this can happen, I have a taxonomy, this can happen in a number of different ways, where you can give intended information to an unintended recipient, or unintended information to an unintended recipient, and I can talk a little bit more about those here. So a recipient misclosure is when you give unintended information to an unintended recipient. And an example of that is phishing. So if I get a phishing email from my bank and they're asking me for financial information and I give that to them, I mean to give the information that I'm giving, I just don't mean to give it to the phisher, I mean to give it to my bank. An information misclosure is when you give unintended information to the intended recipient. This is like the example before where I'm trying to send a photo to my advisor and I attached the wrong photo. A combination misclosure is when you give unintended information to an unintended recipient. So this would be if you accidentally hit forward on an email that you meant to delete. So you didn't mean for anyone else to get that information, but someone did. So to explore whether or not misclosures were occurring sort of outside of these extreme examples that I gave before from the media, I ran a critical incident study using the critical incident technique. I had 27 younger adults and 30 older adults participate in critical incident interviews. This is just a basic overview of what happened. People came in and I gave them 5 minutes I explained kind of the idea of the study, and I gave them 5 minutes to think about whether or not they had ever experienced a misclosure, and then I asked them to tell me about any incidents that they had experienced, and then repeat that for all incidents that they recalled. The key questions that I was looking at in this study were, do younger and older adults experience technology-related disclosure errors, and if so, what type? What's the incidence of each type of misclosure? What factors, so what design factors, what person factors create a situation where individuals do misclose, and what individual factors increase or influence misclosure rates. So do younger and older adults experience technology-related disclosure errors? Yes. Overwhelmingly, yes. Only 5 of the older adults that I interviewed said that they could not recall a misclosure incident having occurred, and all of the younger adults said that they had experienced a misclosure incident themselves. Just as a quick thing here, how many people have ever experienced a misclosure? Okay. Not everybody, though. Maybe if you think about it a little bit more. By the way, if you have really good ones, you should email them to me because I'm a collector of misclosures. So in terms of the number of misclosure incidents that were reported, older and younger adults both reported about the same number of misclosure incidents, and that was about 3 per person. So when people came in, on average it was about 3 that they told me about. The types of misclosures that people reported did vary with respect to age, but there were overall younger adults reported more information misclosures, and older adults reported more recipient misclosures. As we would have expected, there were fewer combination misclosures that were reported. Incidents that were reported had occurred relatively recently for both younger and older adults. In over half of the cases, the misclosures had occurred within the last 6 months prior to the study. Participants reported misclosures across a variety of systems, suggesting that the issue of misclosure spans a number of different technologies. Email was the most commonly reported